All right, so today let's take a look at how to use Claude Cowork to be able to process tens of thousands of OMs a day, really however many you need through automation, through skills. It's pretty slick. So let's take a quick look at some of the setup you need to do prior. First thing you need to do is you set up a folder structure, which is pretty straightforward. So over here, I've created a section for sample files. And in the sample files, essentially, I have a folder for new OMs and process OMs. And how this is going to work is anything that lands in the new OMs folder, and I've dropped some samples here, will get processed and then land in the processed folder with extracted Excel information on all your OMs, and it'll clean out the new OMs. So what's not going to be showcased here is how to land data in the new OMs. You could manually put them in here, but there's more automations you could build. We have a tool that can process emails and drop them in here. But again, this is for everything that happens post and how to set it up in Claude Cowork and how to schedule this. So we'll come back to this folder a little bit later on. Let's jump over to what we built in Claude and just see how that works as well. So you'll notice here that I'm working out of Claude Cowork. So it's going to have access to, a folder. It's going to be working on my desktop. It's going to have a lot of information. And I've already ran through this. This took about 2 hours to build. But again, the automation is going to be worth that times 1,000 if you do process OMs every day. So the first thing I did is, and it's not here, is that I pointed it to the folder. I usually have my Claude Cowork set up to where it's pointed to a specific Cowork folder where it contains files. It kind of keeps everything contained. And in this one, I pointed it specifically to that sample files folder. Walking through, I had it pointed to the new OMs folder. It found the sample OM I had in there, and I just had to do a quick summary on it. So you could see that at a high level, it pulled out some information here, which is really powerful just in itself. But really what we want to do is we want to build a workflow out of this so we're not in here having to touch this every day. So letting you know there's going to be multiple files in here. Just ran, let it know that it will need to loop through. So this is where things get really powerful, right? So I wanted to tell it to go through and parse the OMs. And the key is that you want the output to be the same every time on the end. That way, if you're going to build a secondary hop from this into your CRM or into some other automation, it's always getting the same data, the same Excel files, and it's not getting, a jumbled up version every time where it's having to do a secondary mapping. In here, it's hard to read, but I gave it a very detailed structure of every single file, every single data point. I think there's about 350 in here that would be in an OM, and that's what it's looking for. And if it doesn't find it, it finds a null. It'll populate just an empty string. So it's out there, goes through a while. It's a big schema. It's a very big schema, and it creates an Excel, and it starts doing a validation. So this is really cool. So, it kind of told me what happened. It parsed the file, and then we created the file management. So when the OM is parsed, it drops it into the process OM folder, and then it now empties it out. Allows me to view the parsed Excel. I've already moved it here, so I won't click on this and reloaded it. And one thing, and I think this is really important, is that we want the output to actually cite its sources. So if somebody is looking through this and they need to do a human in the loop review, which is very important, this will tell them exactly where to look for that information. So again, it goes in, turn that on. So we'll come back to this and look at this in more detail. But essentially, you'll see that it pulled out a ton of information. Here is the cited sources on where it found information. So property ID, property, car, amenities, unit mix, the rent roll. I think the financial tabs, again, those are always like really hard and really important. And it'll cite the source. If for some reason you have your own 12 mapping where you want to move something from above the line, below the line, again, you could add that in here so that this becomes automated as well. And once this is done and this looked okay, this is where we start turning this into a proper workflow. So first thing we want to do is we want to turn this into a skill to be used. So essentially, it'll read everything we've done up to this point and generate a skill. And this is where Claude's super powerful, where it went through and asked me, a ton of questions on what we want to do. Should the skill, it should handle industrial, should it be asset class agnostic? So we're going to go for all. Should it include file management system process? It absolutely should. And then this was really cool that, did it want to build an eval? So if you've seen some of the other videos we've done, other things through our education platform, is that we really lean on evals being a very important step to build enterprise level systems. And we used to code this ourselves, 3, 4 months ago. Now this has the ability to start building initial evals. And it starts going through this, and I want to show this next part, which is super cool. Where built the evals, it ran the evals, and again, this is abstracted from me, right? So there's still no humans in the loop, but it allows me then to come in and view the eval results. So you'll see here the different tests that it ran, right? So it ran this with the skill. Here's the output. I get to put in my notes here with my feedback, and then the benchmark, and then again I could click through 2, 3, 4, 5. It ran 6 of these, and it made up these. You'll probably still want to build your own evals on top of this because again, no one knows the data better than you. Um, at some point, we'll publish all of this because we'll continue to refine this. So again, you may not need to do this because we'll have a robust skill. But once it's done, you submit the feedback. You could tell it to fix and apply the updates for what it learned from the eval. Um, so, here's some 2 root causes. So it immediately noticed it found hallucination errors, um, and then went back through the skills file to update and replace that. So it goes through, continues, and we get a big improvement. Again, I would emphasize going back and running a more sort of evals through the step a couple more times, but in the interest of time, we sort of assumed it was good enough, and we passed everything through. And again, you can just see sort of the percentages getting better just as you go through that. It also starts setting up some guardrails, and one of them was, instead of combining steps, it starts doing what we call like task decomposition. So it will break them out into smaller steps and smaller processing, and then add them back together again, which is a really interesting fundamental practice on, when you're building AI processes, how you do want to, if you try to have it one shot something, it's getting better, it's going to get there. But if you have it do multiple small steps, accuracy is 100%. And then you're just left with stitching it all back together at the end. And again, we could view the eval results, but we'll come back to that. And then here is the last step of the automation, which is really baked into Claude Cowork, which is super powerful. So with the command /schedule, you can have it check new M folders every day and run this. So as new M's land in that folder, and again, automating that process is not here, and we share more information on that later. It'll just run every morning, and I've scheduled it. This was the only thing I didn't do before the video. And let's go ahead and run this now. You could also do it from your schedules here. And while that's running, let me switch the screen share back to the folder structure that we have. And what's going through these 2 files. It's going to create process OMs, and we'll go look at the one that it created earlier while it still runs. Here we go. Here's our sample extraction. And again, you'll see all of this data came through. It cited its sources as best it could. So it really creates an easy spot for human in the loop review, the property information, the rent rolls here. And one thing we didn't do is that a lot of the tables in the OMs have total columns. So adding a secondary step to say, pull up the totals and then do a reconciliation against, the sum of this should be added. So again, works really well for the financials as well, just to give you the secondary check that is it pulling out the right information and are the totals correct. And then there's a lot of tabs that are empty, right? These things were not in the OM. I guess CapEx was, loan is not. But again, if you get something that's more robust in a future version, again, it'll pull it all out. It grabbed the comps. Overall, there are 20 tabs in here, including the metadata. So the other agent's still running. I don't know how long it's going to run for, but so we won't go back to that. But just to kind of close on what would be next items to do to build on this as you build this out yourself would be in the shared folder in the process OM. You'd want to build a secondary process that, again, you're going to have structured Excel files land in here and they're ready to go, right? So you could have these shipped to an SFTP and then onto your CRM. You could build consolidations that look for new OMs that came through and really siphon down, are we looking at coming soon versus rent roll ready versus operating bids, and really streamline the process of getting things through acquisitions. Hopefully this was helpful. We'll continue to build this out and bake these things out and share more as we go. Thank you.